I never thought my boss would destroy my life for helping a poor family. But what he discovered 1 year later brought him to his knees. That Christmas Eve, my boss Richard confronted me in front of everyone. "Margaret, you're stealing from this store. I paid for everything." I cried, showing him my receipts. But he wouldn't listen. "You're fired for theft," he shouted. "Let this be an example to everyone else." I walked out in shame, carrying my dignity in a cardboard box. 1 year later, he found me working as a janitor at 2 a.m., barely surviving on 3 minimum wage jobs. When Richard saw me, the truth he discovered made him realize the terrible mistake he had made. But what I told him that night would change both our lives forever. You see, for years, I had been secretly helping families in need, using my own money. The Rodriguez family was just one of many. Carlos had lost his job, Maria was sick, and their children needed warm clothes. I used my employee discount and paid the difference from my own salary. My coworker Linda knew, but kept my secret. When Richard begged for my forgiveness, my response shocked him to his core. What happened next proves that forgiveness can transform even the hardest hearts. Today, Richard and I work together, helping the families I once served in secret. Our store now has an official program to help employees and customers in need. But the moment that changed everything was when he saw me cleaning those floors at 2 a.m. What Richard learned that night about my true character broke his heart into pieces. This is a story about second chances, forgiveness, and how God can use our worst moments for his greatest miracles. The families I helped never forgot. Neither did God. Sometimes losing everything is just God's way of giving you something better. Before I share the rest of this incredible journey, let me know where you're watching from today. If this story is already touching your heart, please give it a like and subscribe for more inspiring, true stories. Now, let me take you back to where my story of faith and forgiveness really began. Let me take you back 12 years, when I was the most trusted manager at Henderson's department store in Seattle. I had built my reputation on honesty, hard work, and genuine care for both customers and employees. Everyone knew Margaret Thompson as someone who would go the extra mile to help others. I had been promoted 3 times, earned Employee of the Year twice, and had the respect of corporate executives. My section consistently had the highest customer satisfaction scores in the entire Pacific Northwest region. It started small. A coworker needed help with groceries. Another couldn't afford her child's school supplies. I would quietly slip them some cash or buy what they needed. I never wanted recognition. I just saw people hurting and felt called to help. My late husband David always said that when God blesses you, you pass it forward. After he died in a car accident 5 years earlier, helping others became my way of honoring his memory and finding purpose in my pain. Then I met the Rodriguez family. Carlos had worked construction for 15 years until the company downsized right before winter. He was a skilled carpenter and electrician who had never been unemployed a single day since he was 16 years old. He was a proud man who had never asked for help, but desperation was written all over his face when he came to our store looking for work. He offered to fix anything, clean anything, do any job for minimum wage just to feed his family. His wife, Maria, had developed chronic bronchitis from their moldy apartment, but they couldn't afford to move or get proper medical treatment. The medical bills were piling up, and without insurance, every doctor visit meant choosing between medicine and groceries. Their 3 children, Sophia, age 5, Miguel, 7, and little Rosa, 9, were wearing clothes that were too small and shoes with holes. Winter was coming fast, and they had nothing warm to wear. The forecast predicted the coldest winter in decades. I watched them outside our store one December evening, the children's breath creating fog on the window as they stared at the winter coats they desperately needed but couldn't afford. Carlos was calculating prices on his phone, his shoulders sagging with each number. Sophia was shivering in a thin sweater, and I could see Maria trying to hide her coughing from the children. That's when I knew God was calling me to act. The Spirit moved in my heart like never before. I approached them carefully, knowing Carlos's pride might make this difficult. "Excuse me," I said gently. "I'm Margaret, the store manager. I couldn't help but notice your beautiful family. Would you mind if I showed you some items we have on special clearance? Sometimes we have amazing deals that aren't advertised to the general public. Carlos looked skeptical, but Maria squeezed his arm hopefully. The children's eyes lit up with possibility for the first time in weeks. I led them to our best winter coats, boots, and warm clothes, telling them about special clearance prices that didn't actually exist. The children's eyes lit up as they tried on warm jackets for the first time in months. Little Sophia spun around in a pink coat, giggling for the first time I'd seen. Miguel found boots that actually fit, and Rosa couldn't stop smiling at her reflection. Maria's cough seemed to ease just seeing her babies warm and happy for once. At the register, I used my employee discount to its fullest extent, then quietly paid the remaining balance with my own credit card while they weren't looking. The total came to nearly $400, almost half my monthly salary after taxes. But seeing those children warm and their parents' relief was worth every penny. I had been saving money for a vacation I'd probably never take anyway. These children needed warmth more than I needed a break. As they left that night, Carlos tried to shake my hand with tears in his eyes, but I could see he was struggling with accepting charity. His voice cracked as he tried to thank me. "This isn't charity," I told him firmly, placing my hand on his shoulder. "This is what neighbors do for each other. Someday, when you're back on your feet, you'll help someone else. That's how God's love works in this world." Maria hugged me tightly, whispering "Dios la bendiga" through her tears. That night, I sat in my small apartment looking at a picture of my late husband David and opened my Bible to Matthew 25, verse 40. "Whatever you did for one of the least of these brothers and sisters of mine, you did for me." I felt David's presence so strongly in that moment, knowing he would be proud of what I had done. I had no idea that this simple act of kindness would eventually cost me everything I'd worked for, but it would also teach me the most important lesson of my life. The next morning, Linda Chen approached me with a puzzled expression. She had been working the register when I helped the Rodriguez family and had noticed something unusual. "Margaret," she said quietly, pulling me aside, "I've been working here for 2 years, and I've never seen those clearance codes you used last night. What's going on?" I could see concern in her eyes, not suspicion, but genuine curiosity about what she had witnessed. Linda was one of our most honest employees, and I knew she wouldn't let this go. I looked at Linda for a long moment, weighing whether to trust her with my secret. Finally, I sighed deeply and said, "Linda, I need to tell you something, but I need your word that this stays between us." She nodded solemnly, leaning forward with interest. "Those weren't real clearance codes. I used my employee discount to its fullest extent, then paid the difference myself. That family desperately needed help, and sometimes we have to be the hands and feet of Jesus in this world." Her eyes widened with understanding, not judgment. "You paid $400 out of your own pocket," Linda whispered in amazement, her voice filled with respect. I nodded, continuing to organize the inventory as if it were the most natural thing in the world. "Linda, when I see a family struggling like that, I can't just turn away. My husband David used to say we're not just managers or employees. We're servants put here to help others. If we have the ability to help someone and we don't, what does that say about our character? What does that say about our faith?" Over the following weeks, Linda watched as I continued this pattern with other struggling customers. An elderly woman who couldn't afford her granddaughter's Christmas dress suddenly qualified for a special senior discount. A single father buying school supplies for 3 children found an amazing back-to-school promotion that covered half his bill. A young mother purchasing expensive baby formula discovered a new parent program that I invented on the spot. Each time, I quietly covered the difference with my own money, and Linda kept my secret faithfully. One evening while we were closing and counting the registers, Linda helped me balance the books and said thoughtfully, "Margaret, I've been thinking about what you said, about being servants." She paused, choosing her words carefully, then continued, "My grandmother always told me that when God blesses you, you become a blessing to others. I want to help these families too. I don't make much, but I can contribute something." Her offer touched my heart deeply, but I knew the risks we were both taking by bending company policies. "Linda, I appreciate your heart more than you know, I said carefully, placing my hand on her shoulder, but you need to understand exactly what we're doing here. Technically, using employee discounts for non-employees could be seen as fraud by corporate standards. If anyone finds out what we're doing, we could both lose our jobs immediately. This has to stay completely between us, and you can't feel obligated to help financially. This is my choice, my calling. Linda nodded solemnly, fully understanding the gravity of the risks we were taking. When the Rodriguez family returned a few weeks later, the transformation was absolutely remarkable. Carlos had found steady part-time work doing home repairs. Maria's persistent cough was finally improving with proper medicine, and the children were thriving in their warm winter clothes. "Mrs. Margaret," little Sophia ran up to me with pure joy. "Look how warm and cozy I am." She spun around in her beautiful pink coat, beaming with happiness that absolutely melted my heart. This was exactly why I did what I did. Carlos approached me with tears streaming down his weathered face, holding out a crumpled $20 bill with trembling hands. "Please, Mrs. Margaret, it's not much, but I found some steady work now. I want to start paying you back for everything you've done for my family." I gently but firmly pushed his hand away, looking directly into his eyes. "Carlos, you keep that money for your beautiful family. The only payment I want is for you to help someone else when you're able. That's how we keep God's love flowing in this world." That night, I sat alone in my office calculating my own expenses on a notepad. I had spent over $1,500 in just 3 months helping various families, nearly depleting my entire savings account that I had built up over years. My own bills were getting increasingly harder to manage, but every time I thought about stopping, I'd see Sophia's radiant smile or remember Maria's grateful tears. I opened my worn Bible and read Philippians 4 verse 19. "And my God will meet all your needs according to the riches of his glory in Christ Jesus." Later that evening, I sat in my small apartment looking at David's photo and whispered softly, "I hope I'm doing the right thing, honey. I know you'd be proud of what I'm doing, but I'm getting scared about how long I can realistically keep this up." As if in direct response to my fears, I felt a warm, comforting peace wash over me like a gentle embrace. God had always provided for me in the past, and I trusted completely that he would continue to do so. I had absolutely no idea that my secret acts of kindness were about to be discovered in the most devastating way possible. Richard Barnes had built his reputation on one thing: maximizing profits at any cost. As regional director overseeing 12 department stores, he was known for his ruthless efficiency and zero tolerance for anything that might hurt the bottom line. His office walls were covered with awards for outstanding revenue growth and cost management excellence. To Richard, employees were numbers on a spreadsheet, and customers were simply sources of income. He had climbed the corporate ladder by eliminating inefficiencies, which usually meant cutting jobs and reducing employee benefits. When Richard made his quarterly visits to our store, the atmosphere changed completely. Employees would whisper warnings to each other. "Barnes is here." He would walk through every department with his clipboard, noting every detail, questioning every transaction that seemed unusual. His cold blue eyes missed nothing, and his reputation for firing managers over minor infractions made everyone tense. I had always maintained perfect records, but lately I was worried about my increased use of employee discounts and the creative promotions I had been offering struggling customers. That month, Richard noticed something troubling in our store's profit margins. While sales volume was steady, the actual profits were mysteriously lower than expected. He spent hours analyzing every transaction, every discount, every promotion. His analytical mind immediately suspected employee theft or unauthorized discounting. "Someone is giving away merchandise," he muttered to himself, highlighting suspicious transactions. He had seen this pattern before at other stores, and it usually meant employees were either stealing or helping friends and family get unauthorized discounts. Richard decided to launch a covert investigation. Without informing me or any of the staff, he had additional security cameras installed in blind spots around the store, focusing particularly on the checkout areas and employee break rooms. He also instructed the loss prevention team to monitor all employee purchases and discount usage more closely. I want to know every single transaction that involves employee discounts, he told them. Someone is costing us money, and I'm going to find out who it is. The trap was being set, and I had no idea I was walking into it. Within days, the entire staff could sense something was wrong. New cameras appeared overnight, and loss prevention officers were asking more questions about employee purchases. Linda approached me during our break, her face pale with worry. "Margaret, I think something's happening. Security asked me about employee discount policies yesterday, and I saw them reviewing transaction logs." My heart sank as I realized what might be coming. But Christmas was just 3 weeks away, and I knew families like the Rodriguezes were counting on me for help during the most expensive season of the year. That night, I knelt at my kitchen table with my Bible open, praying for guidance. I knew I was taking bigger risks now, but I also knew that families were depending on me. The Rodriguez children needed Christmas gifts, and Maria needed her medication money to go toward presents instead. "Lord," I whispered, "I don't know if what I'm doing is right in man's eyes, but it feels right in my heart. Please protect me so I can continue helping these families." I had no idea that Richard was already building a case against me, waiting for the perfect moment to strike. Despite the increased surveillance, I couldn't bring myself to stop helping families in need. The Christmas season was the hardest time for struggling parents, and I saw the desperation in their eyes daily. An unemployed father needed toys for his twin daughters. A grandmother on a fixed income wanted to buy her grandson a winter coat. A young mother was choosing between Christmas gifts and groceries. Each time, I found a way to help them, using creative promotions and paying the difference myself, not knowing that every transaction was being recorded and analyzed. Richard spent hours reviewing footage and financial records with his security team. They had documented dozens of suspicious transactions over the past month, all involving me. The pattern was clear. I was consistently offering discounts that didn't exist in the system and somehow making up the difference. "This is exactly what I suspected," Richard said with satisfaction, pointing at the evidence on his computer screen. "Margaret Thompson has been stealing from us for months, maybe years. It's time to make an example of her." On December 23rd, the Rodriguez family came in for some last-minute Christmas shopping. Carlos had managed to save $50 for small gifts for the children, but it wasn't nearly enough for what they needed. Seeing their worried faces, I couldn't help myself. I created one final special Christmas promotion that would allow them to get everything they needed within their budget. As I completed the transaction and walked them to the door with their bags, I felt a warm satisfaction knowing their Christmas would be beautiful. I had no idea that Richard was watching from the security office, and this would be the transaction that would destroy my life. From his position in the security office, Richard watched me help the Rodriguez family with cold satisfaction. He had caught me red-handed in what he believed was theft. "This is it," he said into his radio, speaking to the loss prevention team. "I have her on camera, giving away merchandise. Tomorrow is Christmas Eve, the perfect time to make an example that no one will ever forget. Call the staff meeting for 4 p.m. I want everyone to see what happens to employees who think they can steal from this company." He rubbed his hands together, already planning the public humiliation that would end my career and send a clear message to every other employee in the company. Christmas Eve morning arrived with the usual chaos of last-minute shoppers frantically searching for forgotten gifts. I walked into the store feeling peaceful, despite knowing about the increased surveillance. I had prayed all night and felt confident that God would protect me as I continued his work. The store was beautifully decorated with twinkling lights and garland, and Christmas music filled the air. Families were everywhere, some joyful, others stressed about their budgets. I had no idea that this would be my last day as a manager, or that Richard had already planned my public destruction for 4 p.m. that afternoon. At 3:45 p.m., Richard's cold voice crackled over the store intercom. "Attention, all employees. There will be a mandatory staff meeting in the main sales floor area at 4 p.m. sharp. All staff must attend immediately after we close to customers. This is non-negotiable." The unusual announcement sent waves of anxiety through the staff. Mandatory meetings were rare, and Richard's stern tone suggested serious trouble. Linda caught my eye from across the store, her face pale with worry. I felt a knot forming in my stomach, but I tried to stay calm and focus on helping the remaining customers. At exactly 4 p.m., the entire staff of 35 employees gathered on the main sales floor. Richard stood in the center like a prosecutor addressing a jury, flanked by 2 security guards I had never seen before. The festive Christmas decorations seemed to mock the tense atmosphere as everyone whispered nervously, wondering what was happening. "Thank you all for gathering," Richard began, his voice echoing through the quiet store. "I've called this meeting to address a serious matter that affects every single one of you. We have a thief among us." The words hit me like a physical blow. Richard began pacing back and forth like a predator stalking prey, holding a thick folder of what appeared to be evidence. "For months, someone in this store has been stealing from this company through fraudulent discounts and unauthorized transactions. This person has cost us thousands of dollars while pretending to be a model employee." His cold blue eyes scanned each face in the crowd, building suspense. My heart was pounding so hard I was sure everyone could hear it. Several employees shifted uncomfortably, wondering who could be guilty of such accusations. Then Richard's finger shot out like a weapon, pointing directly at me. "Margaret Thompson, step forward," he commanded in a voice that could freeze fire. The collective gasp from my colleagues was audible as 34 pairs of eyes turned to stare at me in shock. My legs felt like jelly as I took trembling steps toward the center of the circle, my mind racing to understand how this moment had arrived. The woman who had been Employee of the Year, who had never even taken a sick day without permission, was being accused of theft in front of everyone she had worked with for 12 years. "Margaret Thompson," Richard announced loudly, his voice carrying the weight of judgment, "you are accused of systematic theft through fraudulent discount codes and unauthorized transactions. We have months of evidence documenting your criminal behavior." I stood there in the center of that circle, feeling completely exposed and humiliated. These were people I had worked alongside for years, people I had helped during their own difficult times, people who had trusted and respected me. Now they were staring at me like I was a stranger, a criminal who had betrayed their trust. "Mr. Barnes," I said, my voice shaking with emotion, "I can explain everything. I have receipts for every purchase. I used my legitimate employee discount and paid for everything myself." I reached into my purse with trembling hands, pulling out the crumpled receipts I had saved from recent transactions. I was helping families in need with my own money. I never stole anything from this company. But Richard's expression remained cold and unmoved, as if my explanation was just another lie from a caught criminal trying to cover her tracks. Richard waved his hand dismissively, refusing to even look at my receipts. "Lies and more lies," he shouted, his voice echoing off the walls. "We have video evidence of you giving away merchandise, creating fake promotions that don't exist in our system. These receipts are probably forged, just like everything else you've done." His words cut through me like knives. I had always been known for my honesty and integrity, and now I was being branded a liar and a thief in front of people who had been like family to me for over a decade. Richard raised his voice to a thunderous level that seemed to shake the very foundations of the store. "Margaret Thompson, you are hereby terminated immediately for theft and fraud. Security will escort you out, and we will be pressing criminal charges. Let this be a lesson to everyone here. This company has zero tolerance for thieves." The finality of his words hit me like a tsunami. 12 years of faithful service, 12 years of helping customers and colleagues, 12 years of building my reputation, all destroyed in a single moment on Christmas Eve. Security guards flanked me as I walked the longest walk of my life toward the exit, carrying my personal belongings in a cardboard box like some common criminal. I could feel the eyes of my colleagues following me, some filled with pity, others with confusion and disappointment. Linda was crying openly, but she couldn't say anything without revealing that she knew the truth about my innocence. As the automatic doors closed behind me and I stepped into the cold December air, I realized that my life, as I knew it, was over. Christmas Eve had become the darkest day of my entire existence. That Christmas Eve night, I sat alone in my small apartment in complete darkness, unable to bring myself to turn on the lights or even the Christmas tree that I had decorated just days earlier with such hope. The unopened Christmas gifts I had bought for my nieces and nephews seemed to mock me from the coffee table. My phone had been ringing constantly, reporters, former colleagues, even strangers who had somehow got my number. Word of my public firing had spread through the community like wildfire. I was now known as the manager who stole from families during Christmas. The irony was suffocating. 3 days after Christmas, my landlord, Mr. Patterson, knocked on my door with an expression I had never seen before, disappointment mixed with regret. "Margaret, I'm sorry to do this, but I have to give you this," he said, handing me an official-looking document. It was an eviction notice. "The story about your firing has been in the local newspaper and on the news. Other tenants are complaining, and honestly, without your job, I don't see how you can make rent anyway. You have 30 days. My hand shook as I read the notice, realizing I was losing not just my career, but my home. Meanwhile, Carlos Rodriguez was watching the evening news when a story came on that made his blood run cold. Local department store manager fired for theft on Christmas Eve, the anchor announced, showing my employee photo on screen. Carlos called out to Maria in panic. "Dios mío, it's Mrs. Margaret. They're saying she stole things." As the report detailed my crimes, Carlos realized with growing horror that I had been fired for helping his family. The beautiful Christmas his children had enjoyed, the warm clothes, the small toys, the joy on their faces had cost me everything. Carlos and Maria held each other and cried like they hadn't cried since their worst days of unemployment and sickness. The guilt was overwhelming and crushing. "She lost her job because of us," Maria sobbed. "She was just trying to help our babies, and now she has nothing." Carlos felt like the weight of the world was on his shoulders. This kind woman who had appeared like an angel in their lives had sacrificed everything for their family's Christmas. They had no idea how to find me or how to help, but they knew they had to try to make this right somehow. Across town, every family I had secretly helped over the years was having the same devastating realization. The elderly woman whose granddaughter got the Christmas dress, the single father who had received back-to-school promotions, the young mother who had found new parent programs, they were all watching the news in horror. Each family understood that this woman they barely knew had risked and lost everything to help them in their moments of greatest need. The gratitude they felt was now mixed with crushing guilt and a desperate desire to somehow repay the woman who had saved their dignity and their children's happiness. For weeks, I applied to every job I could find, but the news story had followed me everywhere. "I'm sorry, Mrs. Thompson, but we've decided to go with another candidate," became the phrase I heard daily. Store managers, restaurant owners, even cleaning service supervisors, they all knew my name and my story. The bills were piling up on my kitchen table like a mountain of despair. My savings were gone, my reputation was destroyed, and my future looked hopeless. I had given so much to help others that I had nothing left to help myself. At a community job fair held in the basement of St. Mary's Church, I walked from table to table with my resume, hoping that anyone, would give me a chance. But whispers followed me everywhere. "That's her," I heard people saying. "That's the woman who stole from the department store." Even potential employers who had never met me seemed to know my story. One after another, they took my resume politely, then found excuses not to hire me. I felt like I was wearing a scarlet letter that everyone could see but me. Finally, after 6 weeks of searching, I found work at a small 24-hour diner on the outskirts of town where the night manager, Eddie, didn't watch the news and didn't care about my past. "Can you work nights, weekends, and holidays?" he asked. "Yes," I answered without hesitation. The pay was minimum wage, the work was hard, and the customers could be difficult, but it was honest work, and it was a start. I took the graveyard shift from 10 p.m. to 6 a.m., serving coffee to truck drivers and cleaning tables that seemed to get dirty as fast as I could clean them. One job wasn't enough to cover even basic expenses, so I found 2 more. During the day, I cleaned offices in the business district downtown. In the evenings, I worked as a cashier at a small grocery store. Between the 3 jobs, I was working nearly 18 hours a day, 7 days a week. I was constantly exhausted. My hands were always raw from cleaning chemicals, and my feet ached from standing all day and night. But somehow, in the midst of all this hardship, I found myself still looking for ways to help others when I could, even if it was just a kind word or a free cup of coffee. I had to move to a tiny studio apartment in the poorest part of town, but I was grateful to have a roof over my head. Every night, before collapsing in a bed for my few hours of sleep, I would kneel at my small kitchen table and pray. Lord, I don't understand why this happened, but I still trust you. If helping those families was wrong in man's eyes, I'm sorry. But if it was right in your eyes, please give me strength to continue serving you, even in this dark valley. Despite everything I had lost, I refused to let bitterness take root in my heart. I had no idea that God was preparing something incredible that would transform not just my life, but the heart of the man who had destroyed it. 1 year later, Richard Barnes was working late in his spacious corner office on the 15th floor of the downtown corporate building, surrounded by the glittering lights of the city that never seemed to sleep. It had been what he considered a highly successful year for his career. The Margaret Thompson incident had sent a crystal-clear message to all employees across the company about the serious consequences of unauthorized activities, and his profit margins had improved significantly across all 12 store locations under his supervision. He was meticulously reviewing quarterly reports and preparing for the next day's important presentation when his dedicated assistant knocked politely on the heavy oak door. "Mr. Barnes, I'm leaving for the night now. Don't forget you have that early morning meeting with the Seattle investors tomorrow at 8 a.m. sharp." Richard nodded absently, planning to work for several more hours to perfect his presentation that could potentially secure millions in new funding. The next morning, Richard stopped at a small, cozy coffee shop called Sunrise Cafe, located just 2 blocks from the high-rise building where his crucial investor meeting was scheduled. As he waited patiently in line behind several other early morning customers, something seemed strangely familiar about the young woman working diligently behind the counter. When she turned around to take his order, both of them froze in mutual recognition. It was Linda Chun, the former employee from his department store who had quit shortly after the Margaret Thompson incident. "Mr. Barnes," she said quietly, her voice carrying a complex mixture of surprise and barely controlled anger that had been simmering for months. I certainly didn't expect to see you here this morning." Richard felt distinctly uncomfortable under her intense, unwavering gaze, clearly remembering that Linda had been particularly close to Margaret and had resigned from her position within weeks of the public firing. Something in Linda's demeanor and the intensity of her gaze made Richard genuinely curious about what she might be thinking after all this time. Instead of simply taking his coffee and leaving for his important meeting as he normally would, he made an impulsive decision and asked, "Linda, would you mind talking with me for a few minutes? I have some time before my meeting starts." She hesitated for a long moment, clearly conflicted, then agreed reluctantly, asking her co-worker to cover the counter for her. They sat at a small corner table, surrounded by the morning bustle of other customers, and Richard could immediately see that Linda was struggling with something important she desperately wanted to say. "You know," she began carefully, choosing her words with precision, "I wanted to talk to you about Margaret for exactly 1 year now. There are critical things you need to know, important facts that might completely change how you see what really happened that terrible day." Linda took a deep breath and began to speak with an intensity and passion that caught Richard completely off guard and unprepared. "Mr. Barnes, Margaret Thompson never stole a single penny from that store during her entire 12 years of dedicated service. Every single transaction you thought was theft was actually her using her completely legitimate employee discount and then paying the substantial difference out of her own pocket with her personal credit card. I watched her do it dozens of times with my own eyes. She was helping struggling families survive with her own hard-earned money, not company money." Richard's coffee cup stopped halfway to his lips, and he felt the blood drain from his face. This wasn't what he expected to hear at all. "That's impossible," he said slowly, his voice filled with doubt. "We had clear evidence, video footage, detailed transaction records showing fraudulent discount codes that didn't exist in our system. Linda's voice grew stronger and more passionate with each word as the truth poured out of her like a dam bursting. Those weren't fraudulent discount codes at all. She used her real employee discount to its absolute maximum allowed amount, then paid the remaining balance with her own credit card while the families weren't looking so they could maintain their dignity. I have photos of the actual receipts she showed me, photos I took because I was so incredibly amazed by her selfless generosity that I wanted to document it. She pulled out her phone with trembling hands, scrolling through old pictures with determination. Look at this evidence. She spent $400 of her own money helping the Rodriguez family get winter clothes for their 3 children who were freezing. She was systematically bankrupting herself to help others in need, and you completely destroyed her life for it. You fired the most generous person I've ever known for the crime of being too compassionate. Richard felt like he had been physically punched in the stomach by a professional boxer. The entire coffee shop seemed to be spinning around him as Linda continued her absolutely devastating revelation with tears streaming down her cheeks. She helped elderly customers who couldn't afford their grandchildren's birthday and Christmas gifts. She helped single parents who were desperately choosing between school supplies and groceries for their families. She helped sick mothers who needed their prescription medicine money to go toward their children's basic needs instead. Tears were now flowing freely down Linda's face as she spoke. Margaret Thompson was the most generous, selfless, Christ-like person I've ever known in my entire life. And you publicly humiliated her in front of everyone and systematically destroyed her life for trying to be like Jesus and help the poor and needy. You took everything from her for being too good, too kind, too loving. Linda's righteous anger was building to a powerful crescendo as months of suppressed fury finally found its voice. Do you have any idea what happened to her after you fired her so cruelly and publicly? She lost her apartment because no one would rent to someone they thought was a thief. She couldn't find work anywhere because everyone in this city knew her as the criminal manager from the department store thanks to the news coverage. She's working 3 minimum wage jobs now, barely surviving day to day, cleaning office buildings at 2 in the morning just to pay for a tiny studio apartment in the worst part of town. The Rodriguez family found out she was fired specifically for helping them, and Carlos tried to start a community fund to help her, but she refused to take any money because she's still too proud and too generous to accept help from the very families she sacrificed everything to serve. Richard's hands were shaking so violently that his coffee cup rattled loudly against the saucer, spilling dark liquid across the small wooden table and onto his expensive suit. The full magnitude of his terrible, life-destroying mistake was crashing down on him like an unstoppable avalanche of guilt and horror. He had systematically destroyed an innocent woman, a woman who was guilty of absolutely nothing more than extraordinary generosity, selfless compassion, and Christ-like love for others. His relentless pursuit of profit and his cynical assumptions about human nature had completely blinded him to the beautiful truth about Margaret's character. Where is she now? He managed to whisper, his voice barely audible above the coffee shop's background noise. I need to find her immediately. I need to make this right somehow. Please, Linda. I have to try to undo this terrible injustice I've caused. Linda studied Richard's face intently for a long moment, searching for any sign of genuine remorse versus mere damage control, as she could see what appeared to be authentic regret and desperate remorse in his eyes. I don't know exactly where she lives now, she said slowly, still wary but seeing his obvious pain, but I know she works the night shift cleaning offices in the business district downtown. I've seen her a few times when I was getting off work late for my second job. She usually starts around midnight at the Madison building on 5th Street, working for some cleaning company that pays minimum wage. She paused, then added with steel in her voice and fire in her eyes. If you're planning to make things worse for her somehow, Mr. Barnes, I swear on everything I hold sacred that I'll make sure everyone in this entire city knows exactly what kind of heartless man you really are underneath that expensive suit. That night, Richard canceled his crucial investor meeting that could have secured millions in funding and drove aimlessly through the city streets, his mind reeling and spinning from Linda's earth-shattering revelations about Margaret's true character. Everything he thought he knew about the Margaret Thompson case had been completely, utterly wrong from the beginning. He had built his entire career on being thorough and analytical, on getting the facts right, on making smart business decisions based on careful evaluation. But in the most important decision of his recent career, he had been completely, catastrophically wrong about everything. As he drove slowly past the Madison Building on 5th Street, he saw a lone figure pushing a cleaning cart through the brightly lit lobby. His heart stopped completely. After a full year of thinking he had successfully eliminated a problem employee, he was about to face the innocent woman whose life he had destroyed for the unforgivable crime of being too generous, too loving, and too much like the person he should have been but never was. At 2 a.m. in the morning, the Madison Building was nearly empty except for a few security guards and the occasional late-working attorney burning the midnight oil on important cases. I pushed my heavy cleaning cart down the long marble hallway, my footsteps echoing eerily in the profound silence of the sleeping city around us. This was my third job of the day. I had already finished my exhausting evening shift at the grocery store and would need to be at the diner in just 4 hours to start my morning shift there. My hands were painfully raw from harsh cleaning chemicals. My back ached constantly from bending over countless desks and trash cans, but I kept moving forward with determination. In the peaceful quiet of these lonely late-night hours, I often talked to God, asking Him to help me understand His plan for my life and why my path had taken this difficult turn, but I always ended these conversations with genuine gratitude for having steady work when so many people had none at all. Richard sat alone in his expensive Mercedes in the dimly lit parking garage across the street, his hands gripping the leather steering wheel so tightly his knuckles had turned completely white from the pressure. He had been sitting there for over an hour, trying desperately to find the courage to go inside and face the woman whose life he had so catastrophically destroyed based on his terrible misunderstanding. Linda's devastating revelations kept echoing relentlessly in his mind like a broken record of shame and regret. How do you apologize to someone whose entire existence you've shattered based on false assumptions? How do you even begin to make amends for such a catastrophic error in judgment that had destroyed an innocent person's life? Finally, after what felt like an eternity, he took several deep breaths, straightened his expensive tie with trembling hands, and walked toward the building entrance, his heart pounding with dread and desperate hope for some kind of redemption. When Richard walked into the brightly lit lobby and saw me there in my faded cleaning uniform, both of us froze completely, as if time itself had stopped moving around us. The woman he remembered as an impeccably dressed, confident store manager who had once commanded respect from everyone was now wearing a worn blue cleaning outfit. Her beautiful hair pulled back in a simple ponytail, rubber gloves covering her hands that had once managed million-dollar operations and led teams of employees. For what felt like an eternity, neither of us moved or spoke a single word. The heavy silence stretched between us like a vast chasm filled with a year's worth of pain, devastating misunderstanding, life-changing consequences, and unspoken truths that hung in the air like ghosts. I was the first to recover from the shock, straightening my shoulders and lifting my chin with the quiet dignity I had somehow managed to maintain through all my trials and hardships. "Mr. Barnes," I said quietly, my voice steady despite the complete shock of seeing him there at such an unexpected hour of the night. "I didn't expect to see you here tonight. Are you working late on an important project?" There was no anger in my voice, no visible bitterness or resentment, just the same polite, professional courtesy I had always shown him during our years of working together before everything fell apart. Richard opened his mouth to respond, but found himself completely speechless and paralyzed by the magnitude of the moment. His usual commanding presence and corporate confidence had completely abandoned him, replaced by crushing shame, overwhelming guilt, and the terrible weight of his mistake pressing down on his shoulders. He stood there like a broken statue, struggling desperately to form even the simplest words, his hands visibly trembling like leaves in a strong wind. Finally, Richard managed to gesture with a trembling hand toward a small seating area near the floor-to-ceiling lobby windows that overlooked the sleeping city. Margaret, could we please talk for just a few minutes? I know I have absolutely no right to ask this of you, but please. I nodded silently and followed him to the comfortable leather chairs, settling down gracefully while he sat across from me, his hands visibly shaking like he was suffering from some kind of illness. I talked to Linda Chin yesterday, he began, his voice cracking with raw, uncontrolled emotion. She told me things, devastating things about what really happened, about what you were actually doing all those times I thought you were stealing. She told me the truth about your generosity and sacrifice. He paused, struggling desperately to continue. Margaret, I know I made the most terrible, unforgivable mistake of my entire career and possibly my entire life. Richard's carefully constructed corporate facade completely crumbled and shattered before my eyes as he continued, speaking through his tears of shame and regret. I was so obsessed with profit margins, so absolutely convinced that someone was stealing from the company, that I never even considered the possibility. I never imagined that someone could be that generous, that completely selfless with their own hard-earned resources and personal sacrifice. Tears were now streaming freely down his weathered face, something I never could have imagined from this previously cold, calculating businessman who had seemed so heartless. You were using your own precious money to help struggling families, weren't you? You were paying for everything yourself out of pure compassion and Christian love, and dear God, what have I done? I destroyed an innocent, beautiful soul for the terrible crime of being too kind, too generous, too Christ-like for this cruel world. I destroyed you for being everything I should have been, but was too selfish and blind to become. I looked at this once powerful man who had seemed so intimidating and untouchable, now completely broken and weeping uncontrollably in front of me like a lost child, and I felt something I hadn't expected to feel, genuine compassion and pity for his obvious pain and suffering. "Mr. Barnes," I said gently, my voice filled with warmth and understanding despite everything he had put me through, "I want you to know that I truly understand why you did what you did that terrible day. You were trying to protect the company and its employees, doing what you believed was right based on the information and evidence you had at the time. I don't hold any anger or resentment toward you in my heart." Richard looked up at me with complete amazement and total disbelief, as if I had just spoken in an alien language he couldn't possibly comprehend or understand. I leaned forward slightly, my voice filled with quiet strength and unshakable peace that came from deep within my soul. "You see, Mr. Barnes, my faith teaches me that forgiveness isn't about whether someone deserves it or has earned it through their actions. It's about freeing your own heart and soul from the deadly poison of bitterness, anger, and hatred that destroys the person carrying it. My late husband David used to tell me that holding grudges is like drinking poison every single day and expecting the other person to die from it instead of you. I've spent this entire difficult year learning to trust completely that God has a perfect plan for my life, even when I can't see it or understand it with my limited human perspective." Richard stared at me as if I were some kind of supernatural being speaking in a completely foreign language that his logical, business-minded brain simply couldn't process, comprehend, or make sense of in any way. Richard suddenly leaned forward with desperate, urgent intensity, his words tumbling out in a frantic rush of guilt and determination. "Margaret, please, you absolutely have to let me fix this terrible injustice I've caused in your life. I'll give you your management position back immediately. No, better than that, I'll promote you to regional manager over all our stores with full authority. I'll give you a substantial raise, a huge signing bonus, whatever you need to rebuild your shattered life and restore your financial security. I'll personally call every newspaper, every news station, every media outlet, and tell them the complete truth about your innocence and heroism." But I gently shook my head with a sad, peaceful smile that came from deep contentment. "Mr. Barnes, I truly appreciate your sincere desire to make things right and repair the damage, but I don't need you to fix or rescue my life from its current circumstances. I've learned to find genuine peace, joy, and purpose even in these humble circumstances that God has allowed. Richard sat back in his expensive leather chair, completely overwhelmed and emotionally devastated by the incredible grace, forgiveness, and Christ-like love I was showing him despite everything he had done to systematically destroy my life and reputation. I don't understand you, Margaret Thompson. I simply cannot comprehend how any human being could be this good, this forgiving, this genuinely Christ-like in the face of such terrible injustice and undeserved suffering at my hands. I stood up slowly, preparing to return to my humble work with my dignity and faith intact. Mr. Barnes, we're all just broken, imperfect people trying our very best to do what's right in this difficult world. You made a serious mistake, but you're here now, genuinely trying to make it right and seeking forgiveness. That tells me something very important about who you really are underneath all that corporate armor and professional facade. As I walked back toward my cleaning cart, I could hear him crying softly behind me, and I knew that something fundamental and life-changing had occurred in both of us during this sacred encounter. The morning after our life-changing conversation that had completely transformed both our perspectives on life and forgiveness, Richard arrived at the store before dawn and began preparing something extraordinary that would mark a new chapter for both of us. He had the entire maintenance team clear out the largest, most prestigious office space in the building and install brand new furniture, state-of-the-art computers, and everything needed for a general manager's headquarters that reflected true respect and authority. On the beautiful mahogany door, he carefully placed a gleaming nameplate that read, "Margaret Thompson, General Manager," in elegant gold lettering. When I arrived for what I thought would be another difficult conversation about his heartfelt offers to make amends, he led me to this stunning office with tears in his eyes and said simply, "Margaret, this is where you belong. Not just as the manager you were before, but as the general manager you should have always been from the very beginning." I stood in that spacious, beautifully appointed office with floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the bustling store below, completely overwhelmed by the magnitude of what Richard was offering me and what it represented for our futures. "But Mr. Barnes," I said softly, my voice filled with uncertainty, "I'm not sure I'm emotionally ready to come back to this place where so much pain occurred. So much has happened over these difficult months, and I've learned to find genuine peace and contentment in my current humble situation." Richard nodded with deep understanding and respect for my hesitation. "Margaret, I know I have absolutely no right to ask anything of you after the devastating pain I've put you through, but I desperately need you to help me transform this entire company into something that truly reflects the values you've always lived by so beautifully. I can't do it alone. I need someone who understands that authentic success comes from serving others with genuine love, not just from maximizing profit margins." That same afternoon, Richard brought Linda Chun into my impressive new office with a proposal that surprised both of us and demonstrated how completely his perspective on leadership and loyalty had changed. "Linda," he said with genuine remorse and respect, "I know you left this company because of my unconscionable treatment of Margaret, and I don't blame you one bit for losing faith in our leadership. But I want to offer you the position of assistant manager under Margaret's guidance and leadership. Your unwavering loyalty to her during her darkest hour and your deep understanding of what real customer service looks like makes you exactly the kind of principled leader we desperately need." Linda looked at me with tears of hope and gratitude in her eyes, and I nodded with a warm, encouraging smile. "Linda, you kept my secret and showed me true friendship when it cost you nothing, but could have cost you everything. I would be deeply honored to work alongside you again in rebuilding this place into something we can all be proud of." Within 2 weeks, we had completely revolutionized the store's policies, mission statement, and entire approach to doing business in the community. Standing before all the employees in the exact same place where I had been publicly humiliated over a year earlier, Richard and I announced the comprehensive new employee and customer care program with pride and determination. From this day forward, I explained to the gathered staff with conviction, this store will officially help employees and customers who are struggling financially through organized, dignified programs. We'll have a dedicated fund, proper procedures that maintain everyone's dignity, and most importantly, we'll treat every person who needs help with genuine respect and compassion. The transformation in the employees' faces was immediate and profound. Hope, pride, and renewed purpose replaced the fear and tension that had once defined this workplace under the old, heartless system. One beautiful evening, Richard and I made our first official visit to the Rodriguez family's home, which was now warm, comfortable, and filled with the joyful laughter of healthy, thriving children who had grown so much since our first meeting. Carlos had found steady, well-paying employment and was thriving in his new position. Maria's health had improved dramatically with proper medical care, and their 3 children were excelling in school and involved in various activities. "Mr. Barnes," Carlos said with deep emotion and gratitude, "I want to thank you from the bottom of my heart for making things right with Mrs. Margaret. She saved our entire family when we had absolutely nothing and nowhere to turn, and now you've helped save her too." Richard looked around at the happy, healthy family living in dignity and realized with crystal clarity that this was what true success looked like. Not impressive numbers on a financial report, but real people living genuinely better lives because of their compassionate actions. Over the following months, Richard and I made it our deeply personal mission to visit every single family I had secretly helped over the years, bringing official assistance through our new programs and building lasting relationships with each one. The elderly woman who had received the senior discount for her granddaughter's Christmas dress was now an official volunteer coordinator in our expanding community outreach program. The struggling single father who had desperately needed help with school supplies became our very first recipient of the educational support fund we established with great care. Each meaningful visit strengthened Richard's growing understanding that business success and community service weren't opposing forces as he had always believed. They were actually meant to work together harmoniously to create something beautiful, sustainable, and beneficial for everyone involved in the community. 6 months after our transformation began in earnest, our store was more successful than it had ever been in its entire 70-year history in the community. Sales had increased by a remarkable 40%. Employee turnover had dropped to nearly zero for the first time ever, and customer satisfaction scores were the highest in the company's entire regional network, spanning 5 states. The large community bulletin board near the main entrance was completely covered with heartfelt thank you letters, inspiring success stories, and photos of smiling families we had helped through our various programs. Richard had discovered what I had always known in my heart. When you genuinely care for people as human beings and serve others with authentic love and compassion, prosperity follows naturally because people instinctively want to support businesses that truly reflect their values and demonstrate real, measurable commitment to their well-being and success. Richard sat in his completely transformed office, which was now warmly decorated with photos of every family we had helped rather than the cold corporate achievement awards and profit charts that had once covered his walls. He was carefully reviewing quarterly reports that showed record-breaking profits alongside record-breaking community impact and involvement. I spent my entire professional career relentlessly chasing numbers and financial metrics, he told me during one of our weekly planning meetings, his voice filled with newfound wisdom. And I never realized that the numbers would actually take care of themselves naturally if I just focused on taking care of people first. You taught me through your example that true success isn't about what you accumulate for yourself. It's about what you generously give away and how many lives you positively touch along the way. At our first annual community appreciation event, which had become the highlight of the year for everyone involved, I found myself joyfully surrounded by dozens of families whose lives have been fundamentally touched by our store's new mission and unwavering commitment to serving others with dignity and love. Children of all ages were playing together happily while their parents shared heartwarming stories of how our various assistance programs had helped them through their most difficult times and given them renewed hope for brighter futures. Richard watched from across the crowded room, and I could clearly see tears of joy and deep fulfillment streaming down his face. This was the same man who had once fired me for being too generous and compassionate, now beaming with tremendous pride as he witnessed the incredible, thriving community we had built together through the transformative power of organized compassion and systematic kindness. Every peaceful evening as we walked slowly through the store together before closing, Richard and I would reflect deeply on the incredible, transformative journey that had brought us from bitter enemies to trusted partners and dear friends in just one remarkable year. "Margaret," he said one quiet night, his voice filled with sincere gratitude, "I need you to know that meeting you that night in the Madison building wasn't just about making amends for my terrible mistake. It was about God giving me a precious second chance to become the kind of man I was always meant to be, but had never had the courage or wisdom to become." I smiled warmly and replied with deep conviction, "Richard, sometimes our greatest failures and most painful moments become the solid foundation for our greatest victories and most meaningful achievements. God used our darkest moment to create something infinitely more beautiful than either of us could have ever imagined or accomplished on our own." 2 years later, our store had become the flagship location for what corporate now called the Thompson model of community-centered business. As general manager, I oversaw not just daily operations, but our expanded community care center that served over 300 families monthly with dignity and respect. Walking through the store each morning, greeting customers who had become like extended family members, I marveled at how God had transformed my greatest humiliation into a purpose beyond anything I could have ever imagined. The same place where I had been publicly shamed for helping others was now celebrated nationwide as a model of compassionate capitalism that proved business success and community service could work together beautifully. Linda, now my assistant manager and trusted partner in running our community programs, spread out the monthly reports across my mahogany desk with a smile of deep satisfaction. "Margaret, look at these incredible numbers," she said excitedly, her voice filled with pride. "We've helped over 800 families this year alone. Our employee satisfaction scores are the highest in the entire company's history, and our sales have increased by 70% over last year. But more importantly than any financial metrics, look at these heartfelt thank you letters." She handed me a thick stack of handwritten notes from families whose lives have been fundamentally changed not through secret charity, but through organized, dignified assistance programs that treated every person with genuine respect and maintained their precious dignity throughout the entire process. Our monthly dinners with the Rodriguez family had become a cherished tradition that reminded us every single month why we did this meaningful work and why it mattered so deeply to our hearts. Carlos had been promoted to construction supervisor and now proudly owned his own small but thriving contracting business that employed 6 other men from the community. Maria, fully recovered from her chronic illness that had once threatened their family's stability, volunteered at our community care center 3 days a week and had become one of our most effective and compassionate family advocates. Their 3 children, now thriving academically and socially in school, would proudly tell their friends that Mrs. Margaret and Mr. Richard were their special family friends who had helped them during their most difficult time and continued to be actively involved in their lives. Richard had made it his deeply personal mission to visit every single family I had ever helped over the years, not just once for appearances, but regularly as part of building genuine, lasting relationships. The elderly woman who had received the senior discount for her granddaughter's Christmas dress was now a dedicated volunteer coordinator for our senior citizen outreach program. The struggling single father who had once desperately needed help with school supplies had enrolled in our comprehensive job training program and found steady, well-paying employment that allowed him to support his family with dignity. Each meaningful visit strengthened Richard's growing understanding that truly sustainable business success came from building authentic, caring relationships with the community you had the privilege to serve, not just extracting maximum profit from them. Business leaders from across the entire country visited our store regularly to study what industry magazines had begun calling the Margaret Thompson Community Care Model. Richard would lead these educational tours personally, explaining with genuine passion how employee bonuses were now thoughtfully tied to community service metrics alongside traditional sales performance, how customer loyalty had reached unprecedented levels never seen before, and how our innovative approach had been successfully replicated in 47 other locations across multiple states. The key insight that transformed everything, Richard would tell visiting executives with conviction, is that when you genuinely serve your community's real needs with authentic care, sustainable profitability follows naturally because people want to enthusiastically support businesses that truly reflect their deepest values and demonstrate real commitment to making their lives better. During our quarterly all-staff meeting, I addressed our dedicated team of 68 employees, many of whom had been with us since our transformation began and had witnessed this incredible journey firsthand. 2 years ago, this store operated primarily on fear. Fear of making costly mistakes, fear of showing too much compassion that might hurt profits, fear of putting people's needs before quarterly financial targets. I told them with heartfelt emotion. Today, we operate fundamentally on love. Genuine love for our customers as human beings, authentic love for our community and its well-being, and deep love for each other as partners in this mission. The result isn't just dramatically better business numbers, though those have been absolutely extraordinary and beyond our wildest expectations. The real result is that we all go home each day knowing with certainty that our work truly matters, that we're making a measurable, positive difference in real people's lives. The city held an official celebration recognizing our store's transformative impact on significantly reducing local poverty levels and strengthening community bonds throughout the entire region. The mayor presented us with an ornate key to the city, saying with genuine emotion, "Margaret Thompson and Richard Barnes have conclusively proven that businesses can be powerful engines of community healing and hope rather than just profit extraction." Their innovative model has directly inspired dozens of other local businesses to adopt similar community care approaches, creating an interconnected network of support that ensures no family in our city ever faces serious hardship completely alone. Richard and I stood together on the platform, no longer as former enemies or adversaries, but as trusted partners firmly united in a mission that had fundamentally transformed both our lives and given us purpose beyond anything we had previously imagined possible. Each peaceful evening, as we walked slowly through the store together before closing and preparing for another day, Richard and I would reflect deeply on the incredible, transformative journey that had brought us from bitter enemies to trusted partners in just 2 short but life-changing years. "Margaret," he said one evening with deep sincerity, "I need you to know that discovering the devastating truth about what I did to you wasn't just about making amends for my terrible mistake. It was about God giving me a precious second chance to become the kind of man I was always meant to be, but had never had the courage or wisdom to become. You didn't just forgive me when you had every right to hate me. You showed me through your example how to live with genuine purpose and deep meaning." I smiled warmly and replied, "Richard, our story proves beyond doubt that God can take our absolute worst mistakes and turn them into our greatest victories when we courageously choose forgiveness over revenge and love over bitterness." On the 2nd anniversary of our community care center, we hosted a joyful celebration that brought together employees, community families, and local leaders in a beautiful display of unity and shared purpose. Story after inspiring story was shared of lives fundamentally transformed, families permanently stabilized, and dreams made possible through our comprehensive programs and unwavering commitment to human dignity. Carlos Rodriguez spoke eloquently on behalf of all the families we had served. Mrs. Margaret and Mr. Richard didn't just help us survive our temporary crisis. They helped us build genuinely better lives and taught us through their example that we all have a sacred responsibility to help each other in times of need. Today, our family proudly sponsors another struggling family through this same program, continuing the beautiful circle of love and support that started when they showed us unexpected kindness during our darkest hour. As I stand here today in this store that has become so much more than just a business, it's become a beacon of hope and a testament to human goodness. I want you to know that this story isn't really about me or Richard or even our business success. This story is about the extraordinary power of forgiveness and second chances to create genuine miracles in ordinary lives like yours and mine. Richard learned that true success comes from serving others with authentic love. And I learned that sometimes losing everything you thought mattered is just God's way of preparing you for something infinitely better than you ever imagined possible. Our story proves that when we courageously choose grace over grudges, love over bitterness, and faith over fear, God can transform any situation into something beautiful and meaningful. Please remember, you're always just one act of sincere forgiveness away from changing not just someone else's life, but your own. Thank you for sharing this incredible journey with us. And may you find the courage to offer second chances to those who desperately need them, just as God lovingly offers them to all of us every single day. Where are you watching from today? Please let me know in the comments. And if this story touched your heart, give it a like and subscribe for more inspiring stories.